Hey everybody, this is Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. Today we are answering a specific question sent in, which is, how do I maintain healthy boundaries with loved ones who are still part of the religion that I was traumatized by? This is part of our religious trauma series. This question has been asked in a lot of different ways through comments and social media posts and everything, so I chose this question today because this seems to be on a lot of people's minds right now. A couple of things that we have to establish before I get into the answer, and that is I'm making some assumptions. The first assumption I'm making is that you do in fact want to continue a relationship with the people that you are talking about. Let's just talk about that real quick. You really need to weigh out the pros and cons here. If you are actively recovering from trauma that you have developed through being part of this religion, and you have loved ones, family members, friends that are still in it, if they're actively harming your recovery, that is a different situation. It is very difficult for you to actually recover from that trauma if you are carrying on close relationships with people who are counteracting that in the way they treat you and the things they say, if they're trying to bring you back, those types of things. You really do have to decide if these people are people you need in your life during your recovery time. And then on the other side of that, maybe they didn't realize you left, or maybe they didn't realize how much you needed to recover from, or maybe they did and they, ignored it. If you are on the other side and their religious leanings are re-traumatizing you or reminding you of things that you don't need to be reminded of, triggering guilt in you, that sort of thing, you really do need to determine whether or not they are people you want to keep in your life. You have the right to remove anybody you want from your life. That's just how that is. It's your life. So I'm making that assumption that you've already sort of weighed that out and you have decided to keep them in your life. The next assumption that I am making is that the involvement of said people in the religion that you have left is causing you some sort of stress. I think that's a general assumption, because otherwise why would we be caring? If there was a situation that you were really negatively impacted by and you don't want to continue to see loved ones negatively impacted by it, I'm going to stop this video right there and just say, you can't control that any more than they could have controlled you leaving. It's really important that you're managing your expectations here and that you're understanding that you are not able to affect change in anyone else's life except for your own. And that is why you're asking the question. So all of those things assumed, let's dive in. Recently, a lot of the comments that I have been receiving privately and publicly were people who were resonating with the idea of religious trauma and the idea that they were told to pray their stress away, or that God is the only thing that they need. They don't need therapy, or they don't need medication, or they don't need any of those things. They just need God. And I'm very familiar with these things because I was told a lot of the same things when I was younger. I was also told the opposite. So I had a really big span, but for a lot of people, they are not trusting of psychology, of medication, of the kind of things that do lead to sort of holistic healing. And it can be hard for people who are steeped in their religious beliefs to see a loved one leave, because it does call into question for a lot of them the things that they believed. As I said in last week's video, it is difficult because people who are really steeped in, let's say specifically evangelical Christianity, I see a lot of people who are really just hardcore evangelical Christians, and they are also doing things like screaming in people's faces or telling them they're going to hell, that sort of thing that's really not at all biblical. Like even a little bit. It's hard to see people say they follow something that they don't actually follow. It's also hard to see people that you love and care about follow something that was so harmful to you. So there's a couple of different things here that I think are important to understand when we're dealing with how to maintain healthy boundaries and therefore healthy relationships with said people. The first one is to remember that you have no control over anyone else in your life except for you. You will not stop them from saying things. You will not prompt them to say things. They're going to do what they want to do when they want to do it, regardless of what you are doing. So there's that. Just let that go. You do not have the ability to control that. The next one is knowing what you want. Do you want a full and involved in every aspect of your life relationship with this person? Do you want a holiday seeing each other relationship? Do you live in separate towns and it's just when they come in that you want to talk to them? Do you want to stand up for the things that you've learned and the ways that you have changed and tell this person? All of those things are going to go into how you set up those boundaries. So the first thing is to make sure that you know what you want. And if you don't know what you want, spend some time thinking about it. Imagine yourself in 5 years and your relationship with this person. What do you want it to look like? That's how we start. I would make sure you remind yourself of why you left. Was it physically damaging? Was it emotionally damaging? Not in a way that re-traumatizes you or reminds you of the specifics that happened, but the bigger picture things. I left because my emotions were discounted. I left because they didn't believe that I could be queer and be in this religion. They left because I'm a female and I wanted to be in leadership and I wasn't allowed to do that. The reasons that led up to you leaving, remind yourself of what they are. This can be a tricky one because you don't want to use them as a shield. If you've already done the recovery work and you're on the other side of that, or you're pretty strong into your recovery work and you're doing pretty well with it, you don't need that shield then. And using that shield really just keeps that harm in the forefront of your mind, and you don't need that. I don't want you using this in that way. I just want you using this as an outline to remind yourself of what can happen if you were to acquiesce and head back into that situation in some aspects to please the person that you're trying to draw the boundaries with. Now that you know where you want to go, you remember why you left in the first place, you are going to have a conversation. You are going to need to set up your parameters. Say you only want to talk to them once a week. Don't answer the phone when they call you the other times in the week. If they text you and say, "Are you busy?" Say, "Yes, I am. Can I get with you later?" You're really going to need to do some work on not being triggered by them contacting you. Let's imagine this is a parent and it's a child of theirs, adult child, who has left a religion and they're calling. Just a simple text that has nothing to do with that religion or wanting them to come back or anything could be triggering and set off this anxiety response, right? Identifying that anxiety response and reminding yourself that you are safe and it is not required of you to respond until you want to or unless you want to. Those are really important. Removing that expectation, that shame, that guilt, whatever it is that you're carrying into those conversations will make those conversations more productive. You have to remember that those are borrowed assumptions. You do not need those assumptions on you all of the time. Might they still assume you're going to? Sure. They might assume that you should respond to every text message immediately. That doesn't mean you actually have to. Their assumptions and their expectations are separate from who you are. You can't allow them to continue to inform who you are. So set up those boundaries, know how many times you want to interact with them, know whether or not you're going to allow them into your house, know whether or not you are going to allow yourself into their house. Make those decisions. It is not always required for you to have a conversation with the people. Here's when it is probably required. If they are not taking your hints, if they are super aggressive about bringing you back into the fold, say it's a family member and you all get together and you eat dinner together and they want to pray before the meal. There's a couple options there. Do they want to pray out loud and involve everyone? And is that problematic for you? For some people, it's not. For some people, it is. If it's problematic for you, you're going to have to say something because you need to stand up for your rights. Okay? If it's not problematic for you, it's also okay to just let that happen. All right. It's also okay to say, how about you pray quietly and we'll all take some silence, and then you're respecting boundaries, but also not taking those on by yourself. Allowing people to have who they are in a way that does not manipulate or damage you is really the name of the game when I'm assuming that you want to keep this person in your life. Because otherwise, why would you ask the question, right? If you do have to have a conversation with this person, you need to remember a few things. Remember who you are and remember who they are. Understanding those two things is going to make any confrontational conversation that you're going to go into so much more productive. If you know you are a person who needs to be right, you're going to need to be aware of that desire, because you will not win in an argument with someone who is convinced that their religion is right and yours is wrong, okay? You're not going to win an argument there. So if you are someone who needs to win, you might need to not engage in that argument because it's futile and you're just going to harm yourself and potentially your relationship with this person. Setting up your expectations, being honest with them in a way that just tells them your experience is a really good idea. And I'm saying this because everyone has their own process and everyone has the right to their own process. If something is damaging to you, it does not mean it's damaging to another person, or maybe it is and they're not ready to address it. So you need to make sure that you're really just speaking from your own experience, because again, your experience has power. Your experience is enough. You don't need to go into a conversation and say, well, all these people will agree with me. It doesn't matter if all these people agree with you. It doesn't matter if no one agrees with you. You agree with you. You've done the work. You know yourself. That's enough. that needs to be enough. And if it's not, that's the real problem. Not the religion, not the relationship. The problem is that they do not believe that your word is enough, and that's then what you discuss with them. You don't need to discuss, well, you're still going to this church, and so I don't want to be with you on these holidays because you want me to go to church with you, and I'm not going to do it. You don't need to have that conversation. The conversation you need to have is, I have told you I don't want to do this. I am capable of making my own decisions. I am not stopping you from doing what you want to do, and yet you still are not respecting what I need from you. Tell me why. That's the conversation you have. Not you should or shouldn't go to church, because that's an opinion. It is really essential that you are sure of what you want and who you are at the moment if you're going to go into this conversation. It is never required of you to give anyone a reason for what you're doing. There are some circumstances where it's a really good idea. If you're dealing with a spouse or a partner that is deeply engrossed in a religion that you cannot be a part of, that's a conversation that's going to have to happen sooner than later. If you're dealing with parents and you have left that religion and they are still in it and they're trying to get you back, you need to be aware of what you want and what you don't want. Every relationship is a give and take. That's just how it works. And hear me when I say this to you. If you are going to set up boundaries, you are going to have conflict. That is what it is, because most people do not have good boundaries. So when you put up good boundaries, they will get upset about it. You cannot live your life conflict free and still have good boundaries. So if you're choosing good boundaries, which I hope that you are, you need to be ready for some conflict and know what you will and will not accept. Demonstrate for them the way that you want them to respect and honor your wishes. Do the same for them. If they're not capable of doing that, you have some choices to make. You're going to have to decide if you plan to stay in relationship with them or not. And if you're not going to, you have to be aware that's going to cause some pain. Just because it's hard, though, doesn't mean it's not what you should do. You live your life how you need to live it. You don't need permission from anybody for that. Put up your boundaries and stick to them. You never have to justify your boundaries, but if you want to, that's okay too. You can. And if someone's not respecting them, sometimes you do have to define them. If they don't respect them still, maybe they're not somebody you need in your life. That's it for today. Thank you so much for this question. Keep submitting your questions. I will be back again next week with another question that has been submitted. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you soon.